Today we're going to review linear functions. And I think we all remember linear functions. Y equals mx plus b. So that's the form that most of us remember. You will also even see sometimes ax plus b, because it really doesn't matter what letter we choose to represent that unknown, which that is the slope. And the y-intercept is always the constant. So there's a couple of things we want to talk about. First off, we're going to talk about intercepts. And we just mentioned the y-intercept. To find the y-intercept of any function, we let x equals 0 and solve for y. To find an x-intercept, we let y equal 0 and solve for x. So this is one of the simple ways to graph an equation. So the first one I'm going to do in pink. So to find the y-intercept, we let x be 0. So for the y-intercept, it would be 3 times 0 plus y equals 9. So we end up with y equals 9. For the x-intercept, we're going to switch it and let y be 0. And I get 3x equals 9, or x equals 3. If I know those two intercepts, and I know this is a line, all I have to do is plot my y-intercept on the y-axis and my x-intercept on the x-axis and connect the dots. And I'll just use my paper, make a straight line, and connect the dots. So that is the line 3x plus y equals 9. Quick way to graph. On the other one, y-intercept. We're going to let x be 0. To find the x-intercept, I'm going to let y be 0. Now we have a problem here. This time I only have 1 point. We kind of need another one. So since there's more going on this side of the equation, I'm going to plug in anything I want. Let's let y equal 1. So if y equals 1, I would have x equals 4 times 1. X equals 4. So I know 2 points on the graph. I got 0, 0, and now I have 4, 1. 0, 0, and 4, 1. And then we can connect the dots. Now we also want to think about the meaning of these intercepts. So let's say business property is purchased for this much and depreciated over a period of 10 years. Its value y is related to the number of months of service x by this equation. So let's start off by finding the y-intercept, which is we'll let x equals 0. So in the equation, I'm going to plug in 0 for the x. And what's going to happen to this term that had the x in it? Well, anything times 0 is just going to go away. So I get 4y equals way big number. And whatever that is divided by, I get y equals 1228800. Oh, this is the value value at when x is 0, so when the months are 0, so at 0 months. So if we haven't owned it any months, that's our initial value. So that's the original value is 1,228,800. Now for the x-intercept, that's when y is 0. So let's do the algebra first. So this is going to be 0. So 4 times 0, that's just going to be 0. It's going to leave me with 40,960 times x equals all of that stuff on the other side. And then I would just go to my calculator. And I get x equals 120. So what this is finding, when y is 0, that's when the value is 0. So the value of the property will be $0 when x is 120, and x is the months of service. So after 120 months. Now the next thing we want to talk about, which is super important with linear functions, is the rate of change, or the slope. And let's remind ourselves that we find slope by finding the change in y over the change in x. In other words, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Change in y over change in x. So we'll just kind of review that real quick. If you want to try your hand at doing these and then just check back. Y minus y, x minus x. Y minus y, x minus x. And just a quick reminder here that when we have a positive slope, that's going up and to the right. So it slopes upward to the right. The function is increasing. A negative slope is down to the right. When we have a slope of 0, that's a horizontal line because we have no change in y's. And a vertical line is undefined because we have no change in x's, so it's constantly pointing straight up. Now, a couple of other things we want to remember are parallel lines. Parallel lines, the slopes are equal. And perpendicular lines, that's when the slopes are negative reciprocals. In other words, if one of them has a slope of 3, then the other one would be a negative 1/3. If one of them had a slope of negative 4/5, the other would have a slope of positive 5/4. So when we say negative, we mean opposite signs. I'm trying to figure out why my printer is not printing, so give me just a second here. You may hear printing in the background. Hopefully we do. Okay, now we'll be using that information a little bit later, but I want to review point slope. And point slope form of a line looks like this. Okay, and so the x1, y1 is any point on the line, and m is, of course, my slope. So for these examples, we're going to use these as my x1, y1. So the way you work this form of the equation, we would do y minus the y1 value equals m, whatever our slope is, and in this example it's 2/3, x minus whatever the x value is. Now the beauty of using point slope is you can technically leave it just like this, and it's correct. But if the problem asks you to rewrite it in slope intercept, you could always distribute and solve for y. But if it's just asking you to find that line, then you're really done. What about undefined slope? What would that mean as far as our equation? Well, let's think about it. If we're talking about the point 1, -2, and it's a undefined slope, that means it's going to be a vertical line. There are no changes in the x. Every point on that line has the same x value, so the equation is x equals 1. Ooh, now we're given another point. So we need to find the slope. And we have the point 1, -2 is given to us at the beginning, and 2, 3. So slope would be y minus y over x minus x. That gives me 5/1. And I'm going to use the same point that we had up there, y minus -2 equals m times x minus 1. And you are perfectly fine to leave it like that. Okay. Data from the U.S. Census indicate that the average price P of HD television sets can be expressed as a linear function of the number of sets sold in. So they're basically saying that the price is a function of the sets. So this is kind of like my y, and this is kind of like my x, okay? Then it also says, in addition, as x increased by 100, the price dropped by $10.40. So we're given this change. We're given that the change in n, which is like our x, is increasing by 1,000, and the change in p is decreasing by $10.40. This is really giving me my slope. So let's think about how we would use that to write an equation. Well, The slope would be the change in P over the change in N, which would be down 10.40 over up 1,000, which if I simplify that, my slope is negative 0.0104. Now we're also given another point. It says when this many sets were sold, this is the price. And remember, the sets are my input. So that means I have a point 6485, comma, price of 504.39. So y minus equals the slope x minus. Now, if we had to use this for something else later, you might want to solve for y, especially if you were wanting to put it in your graphing calculator. So we would just distribute and then add that over. Oops. Oh. Okay, so I've got plus, because negative times a negative, 67.444, and then add that over. And there we have it. That everybody knows and loves. Y equals mx plus b, slope intercept form. So just reminding, slope is here, y-intercept is here. If you are given slope and a y-intercept, this is the easiest way to write the equation. Given the slope is 1/2.
Through a guided meditation. Why are we on?
Sorry. And the y-intercept is -3 plus a -3. Now, what if we're given an equation that's not in the right form? Solve for y. So our slope would be -1/2, and the y-intercept would be 4. And once you have it laid out like that, it's much easier to graph. Remember, negative means we're going down to the right. All right. Last example in this section. The population of U.S. males, measured in thousands, projected from 2015 to 2060, can be modeled by this equation. X is the number of years after 2000. So first off, we want to find the slope and the y-intercept. But then this question's asking us to actually interpret it. Like, what does it mean? So remember, a y-intercept is when x is 0. So if x is 0, then the number of years after 2000 is 0. So this really means in 2000, there were y-intercept 142,690. That's in thousands, 1,000 U.S. males. Interpret the slope as a rate of change. So this is going up. So the number of U.S. males in thousands, well, it's not, we don't have to write it there, is increasing by 1125.9 thousand per year during that period.